This feels right. Man, it feels like it's been a while since I hopped back into Kingdom Come. I mostly stopped playing because I felt I'd exhausted my pool of challenges with this game. That was, until a little video I did almost a year ago started gaining some traction. This video was the very first challenge I'd ever done and was released when I was just beginning this whole YouTube thing. As some of you may know, almost everyone who begins their YouTube journey starts off with some less than optimal traits. This could be anything from poor editing skills to bad thumbnails and titles to even the content itself being less than ideal. In the case of this video I'm referring to, it could be argued that I failed on all three accounts. That's why today I'm diving back into the bohemian world of Kingdom Come to finally earn my retribution and finally complete the first challenge I ever attempted and subsequently failed. As the title suggests, I'm going to be beating Kingdom Come before I even start it. First off, I'd like to establish what I mean when I say I'll be beating it, because everyone may have a different definition of what beating it really is. Some may argue that it's completing the main storyline, while others say it's something a young man might do in the privacy of his own home. Well, the definition I'm going to be using for today's challenge is obtaining max level on every single stat, except for this one, this one, this one, and oh yeah, this one. For these, I'm going to be relying on getting as far along as I possibly can, which will result in not a totally max level Henry, but these skills won't really matter much in the long run anyway. If you've seen my previous video, you may know that I wasn't able to finish the challenge because of a bug that forced me into a never-ending loading screen. Since then, I've come up with a completely new strategy that will end up allowing me to achieve much more than I ever did last time and truly become a god before even exiting the prologue. This challenge will serve two purposes. One is to redeem myself from the failures of my past, and the other is to provide a leveling guide for anyone wanting to level up certain skills with minimal effort. But for now, let's begin this challenge and make Henry as suitable as possible for the inevitable siege that will befall Skalitz in the coming days. Or in this case, day. You see, upon starting a new game, you'll be placed in Skalitz completing some pretty easy quests for your father. In this prologue, days don't pass by. You could spend hours upon hours in game without even a second going by. This can and will be used to our advantage since we won't have to worry that much about energy, hunger, and NPC habits. This will be useful information later on down the line. Let's begin this challenge much like the other one, picking the two strength options from Mother, then meeting Father to begin his quest. He needs us to get some tools back from Kanesh, the crossing guard from the sword he's making, some charcoal for the forge, and some ale for concentration. While I set off to do his bidding, I picked up as many herbs as possible to begin leveling up my herbalism, rushing to get the perk Leg Day, which will give me a bit of strength XP for each herb picked beyond this point. Then I met with Kanesh to argue about getting Father's tools back, and after denying my request, I broke into his house to find that he keeps them in a locked chest in his living quarters. This triggers the ability to acquire lockpicks from my good friend Fritz. I then wandered over to Vanyek to get him to go over to the combat arena in order to wait for some sword lessons he promised me. While I wait for that, I went over to the alehouse to trigger a cutscene with my friends listening into Deutsch, who's shouting out some bullshit blasphemy. In order to get payback upon him, my gang wanted to throw some shit at his freshly washed abode. After luring away his wife, we enact our plan, but are interrupted by three do-gooders who are looking to put a stop to what we're doing. It didn't go so well for them. We're chased off by the catchpole and meet back over by Kunesh's house. This is where I get my chance to talk to Fritz and obtain 3 lockpicks, which allowed me to get the tools out of the locked chest in Kunesh's house. After grabbing these tools, I continued going around picking all the herbs I could find, some being hidden inside some bushes. I used both the easy herb picking and easier seen herbs mods to help me find them all. After picking up all the visible herbs in Skalitz, I'm still only left at level 18. Damn. I carried on, grabbing the ale from Bianca and the crossguard from the castle, returning to Father to give him the items he asked for. However, he wouldn't move forward with the smithing process until I finished my sword training lessons with Vanyek. So I went over to him and got that out of the way, trying to earn as much sword XP as I could. Once finished, instead of going to Father and reporting that I was ready to begin, I went over to my lucky guard. Remember, the one wielding a bow? I took him out with a sneak attack from behind. Obviously, I wasn't able to do it successfully on my first try, but a cheeky save before committing the crime was my way around this. Now that I was armed and dangerous, the town was now up my ass to bring justice for the fallen soldier. But just like last time, I took a page from the Hussite playbook and hopped on top of the trusty wagon to begin firing upon all those who seek to reprimand me. I should say, at this point, this isn't totally necessary, and if you want to keep your reputation good, skip this part entirely. Anyway, after eliminating all who oppose my reign, I sought to continue my leveling journey. At this point, I had total freedom. I could steal, choke out, and lockpick my way through this entire town without a care in the world. Until I ran out of things to do. I also had a weird bug where the cows were just missing from this area and there was nothing I could do to bring them back. This would be a major development that would flip this entire challenge on its head. Now, before setting up this next part, you're going to want to talk to Father and finish up any part of his quest you missed out on, all the way up to the point of needing to get Teresa her nails. Getting to this point will rule out any weirdness the game might get into, like an infinite loading screen. Alright, with all that out of the way, have you ever heard of beef jumping? Well, if you haven't, it's a concept that I heard of from another KCD content creator named Helical. This mechanic uses the physics of the game to do some, pretty unique things. Now, it's called beef jumping, but I don't have any cows spawning in my game, so how is this mechanic gonna help me? Well, beef isn't the only thing you can use. That's right, mutton is also a viable alternative. To set this up, you really only need a stack of about 30 to 50 of something similar in size to beef and 2 savior schnapps. Similar to Skyrim, KCD also has its fair share of physics-bending magic. What you want to do is get your stack of meat and head over to this watch post here. Then you want to slam yourself into one of the exterior corners in a crouching position. Next, you'll open up your inventory and ensure you have an appropriate amount of meat and at least 2 savior schnapps. Then, while in the menu, begin dropping your meat one at a time. This is going to cause a tower of meat to appear right in front of you as soon as you exit the menu, and after dropping about 20 slices of meat, you're going to want to drink one of your savior schnapps. Once the game has been saved, you'll want to load that save you just made, and if all goes correctly, you'll be placed in the second story of the watch post. If you aren't, reload the save until you are. It'll put you there eventually. Once you're on the second story, you'll repeat this process one more time and reload until Henry is pushed out of the top of the tower and out into the open world. This is the real beginning of the journey, and if you're attempting this challenge, I would highly advise doing this before anything else, especially if you're planning on maintaining a good reputation through all of this, which I did not. Okay, so now that I'm out of Skalitz, I pretty much have total freedom to do whatever I want, so I went ahead and picked more flowers and herbs. Specifically marigold and nettle. That's right, I'm going to use these to start cranking out some good old marigold decoctions. Now I just needed to get to Talmburg. On my way to the neighboring town, I came across some stonecutters and a blacksmith that I choked out for the coin in their pocket and some easy stealth experience. And since I didn't have a horse of my own at this point, and I sure as hell couldn't afford one, I walked confidently into Talmburg and just stole one out right in front of everyone. Now, doing this is going to slap you with a small fine, which you could usually just wait out by avoiding the town until the heat dies down, but remember, time doesn't pass during this part of the game. Well, weirdly enough, this fine actually eventually went away from me. I'm sure you could use this to your advantage if you try this for yourself. So there I was, speeding out of town on a stolen horse, pockets stuffed with fresh marigold and nettle, ready to be made into a decoction. I rode my stolen horse out of the herbalist just outside of Talmburg, and she was in my way, so I hit her with the old chloroform rag and began to work my magic, mixing together some wine, marigold, and fresh nettle over and over and over again. I eventually got bored of that, and I was getting pretty low on nettle, so I hopped back on my horse and rode out to Rattay to utilize the traders and haggle them down in hopes of gaining some good speech XP. Spoiler, it's not a lot. So now that I was in Rattay, I picked up all the nettle around town, which was super easy since I was now level 19 in herbalism, 18 of which came from the herbs in Skalitz alone. After getting together all the local herbs and hitting level 20 herbalism, I began another tedious alchemy session to quickly get it to 10 so I could begin auto-brewing and making my life much less miserable. I continued my alchemy until I ran out of marigold, then went off to sell my wares and break into a few villagers' homes to enhance my lockpicking skills. I followed this up with an adventure up to Prib to see if I was worth a damn at basically level 0 in every combat stat. Though I might stand a chance since I did have some levels in strength due to the leg day perk I took earlier. Suffice to say, I didn't fare well. These dudes outleveled me by a lot. Far too much to deal with at my current power level. At least I got a bit of sneak and lockpicking experience while I was here, so it wasn't a total loss, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're in a hurry. After realizing I was in no shape to be fighting other humans, I meandered back to Rattay to butcher some of the local livestock, namely the sheep and cows. This is a win-win, because not only does killing these animals give you experience for the weapon you're currently using, but it also grants you hunting XP per kill, and even more if you open up the inventory of the slain animal. You don't have to loot any of the meat to receive this bonus, just simply open and close it. Now, sheep are pretty easy to kill, but will constantly be running away from you, while cows take several hits to kill, and also run away after being struck. This makes this method feel a tad annoying, especially on a controller, since you're trying to swing your weapon while sprinting and trying to aim all at the same time. If you play with a mouse and keyboard, this should be much easier for you to achieve, but there's a much better way, and I'll reveal that in just a moment. It's unfortunate that traders, while in this game state, do not replenish their wealth, since days don't technically pass. This means that every groschen I could find or get from selling my potions, I would desperately need, because, as you may have noticed, I still don't have a horse of my own, which is a definite must for the extra carrying capacity and having a reliable steed I could summon at will. I managed to scrounge up a whopping 2,000 groschen, which was more than enough to buy one of the better tier 1 horses, Trojan, from Merhoyed. Once I had a horse to call my own, I went back to the outskirts of Rattay to continue my slaughter of the local sheep and cows, still on my mission to level up my sword skill. My attention didn't last long here, and my devious side began to show itself a little bit as I casually walked into town looking as innocent as ever. Little did they know the evil behind these eyes. I started small, picking locks to people's houses and chests, then it escalated to full-blown first-degree murder. But I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. We aren't done in Rattay. After obtaining the Scholar perk from the main level branch, my sights were set on getting all the non-skill books I could, and read them to try and get my level as high as possible. Though I unfortunately wasn't able to get it any higher than 8 before all my literary endeavors were depleted. This included a trip to Uzhitz to buy the scribe out of all the books I haven't yet read, and raiding the bookshelf for any others. Alas, it still wasn't enough. Since Henry wasn't able to get as book smart as he wanted, he was sure as hell gonna make sure he was the strongest. I went back to Rattay to learn some more advanced techniques in lockpicking from Miller Peshek, before allowing the rage inside dear old Henry to be fully realized. He went into a frenzy, knocking out and killing every living thing that stood in his path. The tanner and his wife next door to the miller stood no chance against this evil. Henry was not in a good state of mind. He'd been drinking earlier that day, and the lack of awareness led to some gruesome horrors that were fast approaching the unsuspecting town of Ledetchko. Henry crested the hills between Rattay and Ledetchko, overcome with emotion, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to please the evil growing inside him. He became reckless, but efficient, making sure to only take out targets that were out of sight from anyone else, but would leave their bodies for their loved ones to find. It was truly a horrendous scene. It all finally came to an end. Henry had sobered up by this point and was completely oblivious to the crimes he'd just committed. He woke up in a pen full of mud-covered swine. At first, he was repulsed, ready to run to the nearest trough and get a halfway decent washing, but then it hit him. As he observed the pigs roaming lethargically around their pen, he came to the realization that this was his golden ticket. Who would have thought that out of all the places we had access to, Ledetchko would be the one with the most optimal experience farm? Now, I'll get this out of the way real quick. This isn't the only pig farm on the map, I know that. This was only for the narrative. Anyway, yes, I think I found the farm that beats all farms. Pigs. There's 6 of them here in Ledetchko, and if you can find one with more, even better. The reason pigs are probably one of the best ways to farm combat skills, other than defense, is because they're so fucking slow. Pigs won't run away from you like the sheep would, but they would once you strike them, more similar to how the cows work. Let me break it down for you. Each stat has 20 levels, each with 30 more XP per level from the previous. So 50, 80, 110, and so on. With that in mind, we could do the math to determine that there's a total of 6,700 XP total for each stat to climb from 0 to 20. So let's go over some numbers. You'll get 4 XP per pig and 2.5 XP for looting the pig for 39 hunting experience per run. While working with either the sword, axe, or mace, you'll acquire 16 XP per pig for a total of 96 XP per run. Now for the bow, you'll get slightly less, coming in at 14 XP per pig, yielding about 84 XP per run. And unarmed is similar to that of the bow, where you'll earn 14 XP per pig with a plus or minus 2 XP per punch, netting around also 84 XP per run. Now that we have those numbers, next we need to find the runtime average, since you need to ride a certain distance away from the pig farm to get them to respawn. I factored in how long it would take to totally complete a run, with travel time included. Now for any weapon, bow, sword, axe, mace, any of that, you'll have an average of about 1 to 1.5 minutes per run. Now for unarmed, it's almost double the time, coming in at about 2.5 to 3 minutes. Okay, so we have a base XP per run and about how long it'll take for each run to be completed. So how many times do you need to run this farm with each weapon? Well, for the sword, axe, and mace, it'll be about 69.7 trips, with the bow and unarmed taking about 10 more, coming in at 79.7 trips each. This comes in with a total of around 368.5 trips. Warfare, strength, agility, hunting, and vitality will all be well beyond 100% to level 20 by the end of all of this. When all is said and done, you'll have accumulated 11,238 XP in strength, 8,602 XP in agility, and a whopping 26,067 XP in vitality, all well beyond the 6,700 needed for level 20. Now the burning question is, how long would it actually take you to efficiently level up all your combat stats? Well, for the sword, axe, and mace, it's a total of about 104.55 minutes. For the bow, it's a little more, coming in at about 119.55 minutes, and unarmed taking the longest at 239 minutes. Total time for this is going to come in at around 11.2 hours, with 368.5 trips and 2,211 pigs to be slaughtered. Now this might seem like a long time, but after this pig farm you'll be at level 20 in strength, vitality, agility, warfare, hunting, sword, mace, axe, bow, and unarmed, all in 11.2 hours. It's not too bad. Once my goals were met, I moved on from the pig farm and visited Ledetchko's neighbor to the west, Sasau. Now that I was incredibly strong, no one stood a chance against this Henry. I came here mainly in search of more books. I was still chasing my hopes of possibly being able to hit max level with it. I entered the scribe's home and waited for him to leave the building, then I ransacked his bookshelves for any books I haven't yet read. As I try to breach the back half of the building, I'm nearly caught by the bailiff coming back from a short walk. I acted casual and everything seemed fine until I closed the door and Henry went ballistic, choking out the bailiff and taking all of his things, then going right back to picking that damn lock. Yet again, I'm spotted. By the scribe this time. Home dude didn't even seem to notice his buddy slumped over in his chair. Until he did. This was a dangerous situation I found myself in, and in a panic, I choked him out, all while his door was wide open for anyone to see. Fortunately, that didn't happen, and I was able to finally pick that door and go through it. I continued unlocking various chests and doors around the main square of Sasau, eventually making my way up to the monastery. I was able to find a few books I hadn't read here, but most of my time spent inside was sneaking around, knocking out, and killing anyone who dared to spot me. At this point in time, I've reached a lockpicking skill high enough to unlock certain very hard locks, and lucky for me, that included the monastery exterior doors. This is a benefit because the harder the lock is to pick, the more experience you'll obtain from a successful pick. I unlocked all exterior doors, which there are like 4 or 5, with the front gates counting as 2 separate doors. I also thought it would be a good idea to do all this while being drunk. I wouldn't recommend it. After finishing up the monastery, I moved on to unlocking more of Sasau before beginning another round of Alchemy Roulette. It's a new game I came up with. Now it's a lot like Russian roulette, but every time you open your menu to check your level, you add a bullet to the cylinder, and each time a potion is crafted, you must take a turn. This is meant to speed up the rate at which I'm likely to end all of my suffering. In all seriousness though, I eventually stopped at some point, but yet I still wasn't level 20, and I had a pocket full of decoctions. I sold what I could to Nicodemus and went off to Rattay to store the rest for later. I rode off on Trojan into the countryside to gain a bit of horsemanship experience, which you'll just get simply because you can't fast travel anywhere. While I was out, I looked for more marigolds to finish up my alchemy work. I also stopped for any wayfarers or woodcutters I'd cross paths with to either knock them out and pick their chests. Once back in Rattay, I began to dive into some treacherous waters by going around picking all the guards' quarters locks and killing anyone sleeping in there. Now, remember, this is all in an effort to save Skalitz from the incoming raid, so I don't think of this as doing bad things, because it's all in the name of heroism. After clearing out most of the upper gates of guards in Groshen, I went over to my pal, the Huntsman, to see if he could teach me a thing or two about how to train a dog, earning me my first and only level in Houndmaster. I then continued my ninja raid of Rattay, looting and picking everything I could get my grubby little hands on, sometimes doubling back to the places I didn't have the skill to pick when I started this raid earlier. I eventually got myself into a pretty peculiar spot while trying to access locked doors and loot the inside of the lower castle. I was pretty wanted at the time and ended up with damn near the entire Rattay battalion wanting to reprimand my ass. I should have started my looting here. I managed to get up to level 13 lockpicking before leaving Rattay, which led me back to the next biggest town in my path, Sasau. There was some unfinished business I had to take care of here, namely the very hard locks I wasn't able to access due to my low level earlier. This is similar to what I did with Rattay, but it felt like there were significantly more very hard locks here in Sasau. I made my way around town, starting near the outskirts with the Tanner, stealthily killing anyone I found vulnerable enough and lockpicking every damn lock I could find. It took a while to blow through these larger parts of the town, but what made it even harder was the bounty over my head for imprisonment. This meant that I could either fail the run by going to jail, sneak everywhere, or fight a never-ending horde of guards. And since I already leveled up all my combat stats and ending the run wasn't an option, I chose to sneak around in the shadows, taking a bit longer, but gaining stealth experience in the process, so it wasn't so bad after all. Every person, every lock, every surface was combed over in Sasau before heading off to Merhoyed to do much of the same thing. Murder, lockpick, and steal everything that I could carry. Oh, I should mention here that if you chose to do as I'm doing and kill off certain NPCs or villagers, fear not, because all of these people will be back alive and well after you finish the prologue. This includes named PCs like my boy here, Melikar. Okay, back to the challenge. I sauntered back to Rattay after taking care of everyone in Merhoyed to focus on the only combat stat I hadn't yet maxed, defense. Now, why did I choose Rattay? Well, no particular reason other than the guards here already hate me and there's plenty of space to run if I needed to. Also, the chest with all my loot was here. My angle here is to lure the guards at the gates closest to the mill away from their post and engage me in battle. Ideally, I only wanted to get one of these guards by himself, and that could be easily achieved by luring him down to the bottom of the hill. If you keep him close and swinging at you, your target should make his way down the hillside with you, leaving the others stuck to an invisible ledge they aren't programmed to traverse. Once I have my sparring partner alone, I can pretty much just sit back and relax. The only input I need is to intervene when the game gets a little buggy. I think of it kinda like the Tesla auto drive feature. It works really well until the computer wants you to interact to ensure you're still paying attention. Blocking in Kingdom Come is very similar. Every so often, the guard will just keep landing hits on you, even when you have your shield up and are still blocking. I don't know why it happens, but it does. So make no mistake, this is a relatively passive skill to level, but don't avert your gaze for too long, or you'll end up dead. And this also brings up a really good point. If you get injured at any time with any kind of bleeding, you might as well reload your save since you have no way, that I know of, to bandage yourself up because you don't get First Aid 1 until after the prologue. So save often and run away from a losing battle to patch yourself up, or you'll regret it. During my defense training, I also decided it would be a good time to begin drinking. Again, don't do this. I have a better way, trust me. Drinking only ever got me into trouble. As you may know, you can't sprint after reaching a certain level of drunkenness, and I stupidly went back to the castle where there are way too many guards, and I got overwhelmed quickly. Yet again. I eventually grew bored of training defense, so I went to find something else to do before reaching level 20. Don't worry, I'll be coming back later. I was now off to the neighboring town Ledetchko to unlock and raid there, then moved north to Ujits to do much of the same. Then, lastly, I made my way to Talmburg to finish out my stealth and alchemy. From there, I hopped back on Trojan en route to Ujits to finish picking the rest of the locks there, finally bringing my lockpicking all the way up to level 20. There were now only a handful of skills left to max: defense, maintenance, training, horsemanship, and speech. Horsemanship was one of the harder ones to level efficiently. There's really no shortcuts to it. All there was to do was ride your horse as much as possible. I think I mentioned earlier that there was no fast travel, leaving the only two options being either run or ride everywhere. This skill really won't grant you any crazy gotta have it type perks, so it's not really worth it, but in the spirit of this challenge, I'll still be maxing it. I was fortunate enough that I was bouncing between towns throughout this entire playthrough, totally unintentionally, and I've already leveled it up quite a bit from just that alone. There's no real guide on this one. If you really want to level it up quote unquote fast, just ride a big loop around Rattay over and over and over again while you constantly smash your head against the wall. Speaking of Rattay, I was on my way back there to complete my defense training since I was already pretty close to maxing it from my earlier grinding. There's really not much more to say about it since I explained it all earlier, but I guess the only difference here was that I ended up killing more guards than usual since I needed their damaged garb for my next trick. Oh, and if you're worried about maintaining a good reputation, you can always head up to Prib since it's basically no man's land up there. You're free of the burden of crime since, they're criminals themselves. After claiming my level 20 in defense, I gathered up all my definitely ethically sourced armorer, tailor, and cobbler's kits and began spam repairing all the damaged clothing I had on me, which was also totally sourced ethically. Maintenance is by far the easiest skill to max, as it doesn't take a whole lot of repairs to do so. The biggest challenge is obtaining the kits and damaged gear. A quick hack that you can do before even leaving Skalitz, and this only works if you chose to kill all the guards, is to steal all the kits from the trader stand located in the middle of town. He'll replenish this nearly indefinitely if you have the patience to wait. This was the first time I'd kind of encountered any of this, so I'm not sure if it was a bug, but I know that I knocked out the trader every time I stole from his shop, so maybe when he woke up it reset him. I don't know. Try it and let me know. Okay, home stretch, only 3 more skills to level. Even though I was nearing the end of my journey, I couldn't help but saddle up atop Trojan and ride off into the wilderness for hours on end, just taking in the sights and seeing some of the local wildlife. It was serene out here. This was my happy place. Nah, I'm just kidding. I only took Trojan out on a ride to finally push through the last couple levels of Horsemanship. Jeez, after that boring ass ride through the woods, I was yearning for some fun. And what better way to enjoy yourself than pounding a few days old mugs of ale? Finally, I could let my Henry have some fun for once. Ha! You thought. Nah, man, we don't have time for that shit. If you've never drank in Kingdom Come, then you may not know that most, if not all, the alcoholic beverages come with a caveat. The main ones being penalties to your energy or adding to your nourishment. Since time acts kind of weird if you leave Skalitz early, energy doesn't really change unless affected by an outside source, like alcohol. Which means you can only gain it back through the use of cockroach potions since you can't sleep. Now, these potions will work to use, but there's really a much better way. And it takes a bit of setup, but we've already done half the work. So, through the alchemy skill is a perk called Water of Life, which grants the ability to heal 50% more from healing potions, but also makes them alcoholic. With the combination of this perk and the thousands of marigold decoctions in our Rattay chest, we could easily hit level 20 in drinking. Now, I mentioned that this requires a bit of setup, so I'm not finished yet. Damn. I wish I would have thought of this earlier because what I needed required the use of alchemy. This is something I could have done back when I was power leveling. Anyway, don't be like me. While training your alchemy skills, brew a few hair of the dog potions and a bunch of digestion potions. Be sure to either level your drinking ASAP or store them in your chest in Rattay since you don't want to be lugging around like 3,000 potions for the rest of your run. Alright. So I have a bunch of alcohol, marigold decoctions, digestion potions, and a few hair of the dog. All that's left to do is drink. As fun as this might sound, it's really not. The idea is to drink anything alcoholic until you're full, then consume a bunch of digestion potions to empty your stomach, and repeat this process over and over and over again till you reach max level. Once this is awarded, you can now drink your hair of the dog to wipe the slate clean and go about your day like nothing ever happened. All while probably leaving behind a fuck ton of piss and shit in your wake, but hey, that's not our problem. Then there was one single skill left to level, and boy was this never gonna happen. Not in a million years. Now, I'm not saying that I already knew that it was incredibly hard, so I had no intention of actually leveling it, because I tried. Trust me, I tried. Remember when I told you earlier that each skill had a whopping 6,700 total XP to fully max to level 20? Yeah. Well, in this game, you're only awarded, from what I found, a max of 5 XP per successful interaction. I tested this on haggling merchants with a range of 2 to 5 XP, with no change regarding amount haggled, amount of items sold, or even trader desired items like potions to an herbalist. Then I went ahead and tested out some white speech options, which resulted in a whopping 2 XP per. And lastly, I tested successful guard interactions in regards to crime, getting as low as 1 XP and as high as 3 XP. This skill has minimal impact on play, and if you were me, you'd do the same. Fuck speech, I'm not doing it. The only thing left to do from here was travel back to Skalitz, beef jump back over the wall, give the nails to Teresa, and ensure that every Cuman would regret their decision to raid Skalitz on that day. Shit. Well, I guess that's it. I beat Kingdom Come before really even starting it, depending on how you look at it. The 4 skills left unmaxed were Houndmaster, Speech, Reading, Pickpocketing, and I guess my main level 2. But 3 out of the 4 are just simply impossible for obvious reasons, and I literally just said this, but fuck Speech. I hope this redeems me from my total failure of the first time I attempted this challenge, and I also hope this can be used as a guide for anyone wanting to level up a specific stat quickly. Obviously, beyond the prologue, there are more efficient and legal ways to level up, such as training with Bernard, but either way, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to help you out. But that's all for today, thanks for sticking around, and I'll see y'all next time.